Our top focus, Russia has ruled out any peace talks with Ukraine amid Kyiv's fresh advances into Russian territory. The latest missile attack followed a drone attack on Kyiv late on Monday. Kyiv's military has said these attacks came as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky again appealed to Western leaders to allow the country's troops to use long-range missiles, including the Storm Shadow missiles, to hit Russian territory.
If our partners lifted all the current restrictions on the use of weapons on Russian territory, we would not need to physically enter, particularly the Kursk region, to protect our Ukrainian citizens in the border communities and eliminate Russia's potential for aggression.
Now, a U.S. official, however, told the Telegraph that there was no need to send Storm Shadow missiles into Russia because the homemade suicide drones being used by Ukraine were already doing the job. Zelensky claimed that Ukraine now controls over 1,250 square kilometers and 92 settlements in the Kursk region in Russia.
Ukrainian warriors continue the defensive operation in the designated areas of the Kursk region. As of today, our forces control more than 1,250 square kilometers of enemy territory and 92 settlements. We continue to strengthen our positions, stabilize designated areas, and, what is very important, replenish the exchange fund for Ukraine.
The Ukrainian president further added that his country's assault on Russia's Kursk region shows that Kremlin's threats of a retaliation were a bluff. Zelensky said that Ukraine was achieving its objectives. Officials previously said that the objectives include stretching Russian forces, creating a buffer zone in Russian territory, and seeking an end to the war on fair terms. President Vladimir Putin has demanded Ukraine cede swaths of territory if it wants a ceasefire. On the other hand, Zelensky demands Russia's full withdrawal from Ukrainian territory, including Crimea. Moscow said on Monday that Ukraine had struck a third bridge in an assault on Russia's Kursk region. The Russian Defense Ministry said that it had thwarted Ukrainian attacks on 3 more villages in the Donetsk region. Moscow said it captured the town of Artemovo, one of the largest Russian gains in recent weeks. Now, bracing for a further assault, Ukraine ordered the evacuation of families from the key city of Pokrovsk as Moscow's forces inch closer to the logistical hub. Ukrainian artillery fired on a bus stop in the city of Donetsk, which is under Russia's control. Ukraine said Russian attacks have killed 4 people in the frontline settlements in the last couple of days. Now, for the very latest on this, we're now being joined by James Jackson, journalist and political analyst from Berlin. And James Jackson, thanks very much indeed for talking to WION. Now, there are 2 views on Ukraine's Kursk invasion. One that says it has caught Russians by surprise and they have been hit hard. The other that Kyiv has miscalculated and is now desperately in need of more weapons.
So I don't think that I think the former is more likely to be true. Russia clearly didn't expect this. What we saw for the previous year and a half, if not longer, was a form of sort of trench warfare in the east of Ukraine. And it wasn't working particularly well for Kyiv, despite the arrival of new tanks, Leopard 2 tanks in particular. And you know what they did? I think they have a very dynamic military fighting force, and they went around the front lines because they saw this was World War I style trench warfare in Europe. And then so they went around, they've occupied a huge swathe of Russian territory, and in some cases they've been welcomed by local inhabitants, which also no one expected. I think obviously the size of Russia means that this is a propaganda victory, potentially more than any chance of permanently occupying it. But it's quite remarkable that they've been in there for such a long time now without being expelled or beaten back. I think the question is, can they, if you're wondering, is this a miscalculation? The question is this going to provoke Russia into retaliation? Which is the sort of logic that we have been hearing from the US behind the scenes. Then that's why they're blocking the use of Storm Shadow along with the UK. But the question is, how can Russia really retaliate? They've been throwing absolutely everything that they have already at the offensive in eastern Ukraine. And short of nuclear weapons, which I think it's quite clear they're not going to use, I don't really think Russia have that. And I wonder how much it is good politics to appease a imperialist invading power, which, you know, has invaded Ukraine on no realistic pretext at all. You know, what are they going to do?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's an interesting point you're making about what sort of retaliation we can expect there from the Russians. And in fact, you know, the Ukrainian side, or Zelensky, has pointed out that they've called Russia's bluff on red lines as they've crossed over to Kursk.
Exactly. There was even a tweet on the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry page saying, we've been looking for red lines in Kursk Oblast region, and we can't find any. So the Ukrainians are bringing, you know, typical humor to the situation, but they're making a serious point, which is that Russia threatens, but actually I don't think it can deliver that much. And I think that the West has actually been somewhat two-faced on this issue, because when it came to German tanks entering Kursk, or British ones as well, you know, and this was this very historical site of the largest tank battle of history, modern history, the Germans and the Brits said, they're Ukrainian tanks now. So it's not our problem how they use them. But when it comes to the Storm Shadow missiles, which actually could have quite a long range and could be fired from, you know, people say 150 miles or 300 miles away. Ukrainians have also been particularly effective in using Western technology, despite what people were saying at the beginning of the war. When it comes to using Storm Shadows, they say, oh, well, you can't use them there, even though with the tanks, you can use them because they're your tanks. So this is a little bit dishonest, I think. And I appreciate that they were given on the agreement that they wouldn't be used there, but I think that agreement was short-sighted, because Ukraine could use them, you know, hopefully use them responsibly to stop Russia's supply to the region and to eastern Ukraine. They've already destroyed, according to their own reports, 3 bridges. So
okay.
What more do you want them to do?
Okay, but there is a lot of concern that the Shadow Storm missiles could, you know, escalate things to a level that one doesn't want. The West doesn't want, certainly America doesn't want, as it has another war going on in West Asia. But how do you see this panning out in the days and months to go? Will it be status quo? Will things remain as they are? Or will there be more gains for Ukraine going forward?
It's hard to predict this, because, you know, if you ask most analysts, they would have predicted what was going to happen 2 weeks ago. They would have predicted a continued slow grind on the Eastern Front and a continual slow Russian advance. But Ukraine has gone completely around. They've pulled out their Joker card, which somehow no one expected, and they've held the territory for much longer than anyone could have possibly imagined. Whether they continue to hold it or whether they then retreat, I think this is still a Ukrainian victory, because they've shown Russia that its own borders are not impregnable. I don't think they will be using Storm Shadow, because Jake Sullivan, who is Biden's top advisor, is against it. But who knows, perhaps Kamala Harris, when she comes in, will have a bit of a different view, as she reportedly does on Israel and Gaza as well.
Yeah, things could certainly change going forward, depending on, you know, what happens next in the US elections as well. And of course, this is an evolving situation on the ground. James Jackson, thanks very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.